Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I'm your host, Rex Bear, and we have famous psychic, stargazer, Anthony Carr from AnthonyCarrPsychic.com. Now, Anthony is also a part of the Boyd Gang Band, some incredible rhythm and blues. I'd strongly recommend checking it out. He has a magazine and publishing article called The Stargazer, Predictions and Prophecies, and we're going to get into the year 2017. So, Anthony, it's great to have you on the show here with us, The Leak Project. I always enjoy speaking with you. How the heck are you?
Well, I'm as I already mentioned, I'm another year older and deeper in debt. But what was the question? Oh, how am I doing?
Nice.
I'm having a senior moment, as they say. But how's everything with you, Mr. Rex Bear?
It's great, and it's nice to finally get a chance to talk again. It's been several months. And I had a chance to actually go through your Stargazer predictions and prophecies. And I noticed one of the things that you put in there, one of the first things you put was you see the new president-elect, Donald Trump, as somebody that's going to march America down the path of hell straight into World War III.
Well, first of all, we all thought that Hillary Clinton was going to be the first female president. And I couldn't back out of that prediction because I had put that in my book 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, and I have an email media list of 7,000 worldwide. So there's no way I could retract that. And I had to stand by it anyway, because as I say, 10 years ago, I mean, who knew about Donald Trump at the time? And I always said, although I did say right after that prediction, I had said a dark horse will suddenly appear out of the clear blue and take a run at the presidency and could win and would make Iron Lady Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of England, formerly the late, look like a pantywaist. But I had no idea until Trump mentioned that he was going to take a run at the presidency, who that was. And I got to tell you, as many times as I've been asked who was going to win, I always had this nagging doubt in the pit of my stomach, the solar plexus, your gut feeling, your instincts, that no matter what I was saying with my false brain, that's our so-called intellect, the real brain is that nagging feeling we all get in solar plexus that's going to always tell you the truth. And I really ignored that. And I always tell my students, and I always say, never, never let your personal biases get in the way of the universal truth. And I was just as guilty of that as anyone else. And now here's something from Nostradamus that some of the experts, who are supposed to be experts in Nostradamus lore, what's that one fellow's name? Hogue, I think it is, John Hogue. Anyway, and they missed this one, and it says, quote, you may have a copy of it there, Rex. One day the great powers will become friends, and their power will increase. America will be at the height of its power. To the man of blood, the opportunity will be given, the man with the orange helmet. I mean, how close can you come? This is 400 years ago, the man with the orange helmet. Then it continues, but the two will not remain united for long, and in 13 years they will surrender to the Middle East. There will be much loss on both sides, and Pope Peter will be needed. Now, this is from a book written by Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre sounds like the macabre actor back in the 30s and 40s. Anyway, that's Nostradamus 2003 to 2025 by Peter Lorre. I predict President-elect Donald Trump is going to march us down the path to hell and straight into World War III. Now, you know, Mother Russia's mandate has always been and always will be, quote, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Trump and Putin may be buddy-buddy today, but tomorrow, Putin is playing Trump like a violin, just stringing him along. Or should that be like a trumpet? According to the Toronto Star, who said on September 22, 2001, which was just after they printed my prediction about 9/11, September 22, 2001, quote, we were still embarrassed that we bought an earlier phony prophecy attributed to the 16th century soothsayer Nostradamus about the U.S. electing a village idiot as president, unquote. Now that's from the Toronto Star. That's not from me. Oh yes, and many a truth is being spoken in jest. I mean, who knew as president? Oh yes, and many a truth has been spoken in jest. I mean, for God's sakes, America will never be the same after his reign, though it be brief. Within 2 years, he'll leave office, either vertically or horizontally, or be impeached, and the presidency will never be the same again, having left it in shambles. I believe Trump will spark race riots, another civil war, as in the civil war between the states when Abraham Lincoln was elected president. Reverse women's rights and destroy America. In short, he will unwittingly spark the apocalypse. The apocalypse. Anyway, ye gads, what changes shall be wrought in the coming years? So prepare ye then for the new world order. Again, flee to the mountaintops. Eventually, the darkest caves, the bowels of the earth. World War III is upon us, or shortly will be. The Mideast will ignite like a Roman candle. This current quote-unquote skirmish is aught but a prelude to global conflagration. And never-ending chain reaction, this oscillating conflict between Muslim and Jew will draw in every nation on earth. Increasing exponentially, it is as a pebble tossed onto the mill pond of humanity, its stillness forever shattered, its ever-widening circle engulfing all. Nor shall the West escape, quote, be not smug, O ye on foreign shores, for I shall rain down fire and brimstone upon thy heads. And that's from the Old Testament of the Christian Bible, of course.
Well, and I wonder sometimes too, because like you said earlier, when you had that vision of Hillary, but there was that inside of your gut was telling you that that might not take place. Sometimes, do you think that maybe this prediction you're making might be based upon the fact that you don't have respect for Trump just because the way you feel about him?
Well, I've examined exactly what you just said many, many times. And to be really, really honest, I'm completely ticked off that I was proven wrong, as many others were, in front of millions and millions and millions of listeners. And actually, probably the first time in my life. But again, as a lesson, don't let your personal biases interfere with universal truths. The electrical impulses, which bombard our entire neurological system from the universe, is what controls us and what tells us what's going to be, and creates images in our third eye, our pineal gland, that one between our eyes. The audio sounds that give you these little recordings in your ear. The universe records sounds and words and voices as easily as it transmits images and pictures. And of course, that's the way we, in media, or as you know, we call it traveling through the ether. Well, that's the way humans and animals receive their impulses and their intuitions by the same mode through the electrical universe. And even though I don't personally, you know what? I have to say it. There were some things that he talked about that I kind of agreed with. He is not a demigod, but a demagogue. He panders to the prejudice and fears of the public, and tells them and says the things they want to hear. And some of the things he said, some make perfectly good sense. But underneath it all, I don't trust the man. He's a loose cannon, and he's a typical Gemini in the sense that he just opens his mouth and lets it fly, and he has no filter at all on what he says. And that's the big problem. You can't do that with world. And don't get me wrong, I don't have any great love for Hillary Clinton either. I'm not enamored of her in any way. It's just the way that predict. What I should have said 10 years ago was I see her rising very high in politics. And if you look at my predictions from 10 years ago, I said possibly, and that got me off the hook, possibly she may be the first female president, woman president of the United States, or, and this is what really got me off the hook, the first de facto president. And if our listeners are familiar with the word de facto, I had to look it up myself, which is the one who wields real power behind the throne. For instance, Al Capone was the de facto mayor of Chicago, and Big Bill Thompson, who was the legitimate mayor, had no say at all in running the city. He had to go to Al Capone to get permission to do anything. And of course, Hillary did win the popular vote.
And with that said, also, I wonder, I mean, you wrote also, do you think that she's going to get in politics and other aspects and kind of skyrocket and possibly make it back into the presidency?
I think she's not done yet. I think her legacy will be something more than merely the office of the president. Uh, I'm not quite sure what that would be. Although she does really have to watch her health. I mean, she's so disappointed uh, at losing the presidential race. She will probably be in for quite a bout of depression and bouts with the bottle, perhaps, and so on. I'm kind of worried about her. I don't know if worry is the right word, but concerned about her health and her vascular system, particularly around the brain and so on.
Yeah, I remember
But,
seeing.
but I'll tell you,
I remember,
I have no doubt, Rex. I got to tell you, instinctively, intuitively, I think this guy Trump is going to cause a lot of trouble in the world. A lot of trouble in the world. The likes of which we've never seen, not since the inception of the first presidency.
it's going to be interesting because I've heard differing reports. You know, I've heard both sides of the fence. A lot of people feel that he's going to usher in a new golden age and renaissance and bring new opportunities and abundance to the country and the world. And some people think the exact opposite. So, I,
He listens to his advisors and stays out of trouble. Possibly, he could fool all of us, and be, as you say, the fair-haired boy. But I don't think so. He has a tendency, again, with the arrogance of the nouveau riche, and he seems to forget that people like Putin, Korea, they got more. They got money. The Arab Emirates states, they have more money. They have the kind of money that would make his money look like chump change. Donald Trump, and he can't talk to them and treat them. In fact, what's that latest comment to do with China? Talking about an all one inclusive China, and I guess referring to is it Thailand? And they would like to be sovereign, and of course China doesn't see it that way, and Trump saying, "Oh well, sure they can," and blah blah. He's sticking his nose in right in the middle of other governing bodies and other countries and lands, and it's just gonna bring things to a boil, and then we're going to all be in big trouble. I'm telling you, believe me.
now,
Anyway,
what do you think about you wrote also about there being compulsory enlistment in Canada and the United States?
I mean, compulsory, not enlistment. What's it? Well, you got me. I forgot the other word for it. Conscription. Conscription. Is that the word we were thinking?
Yes.
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 I do believe that. I do believe that. Of course, as I've said, I've always believed that the God of the Bible was a star traveler. The book of Revelation, I think the very last verse says, the Lord and his hosts will return. The Lord and his hosts. Well, the Lord can mean anything. And the host is like could be a host of an army, a host, the giant star traveler and his heavenly hosts, astronauts, whatever, will return here and stop the carnage, lest the whole entire human race is wiped from the face of the earth. And I truly, really do, from the bottom of my heart, believe that's exactly what's going to happen.
That does sound similar to the Anunnaki and the wars of Enki, Enlil being star travelers, etc. So, I mean, certainly those are possibilities. And another one of the prophecies that you talk about in Stargazer, and folks, if you're interested in Anthony's work, you can go to Anthony Carr, psychic.com. You talk about the death of Bush Sr. You think that he's going to die this year?
I was watching a documentary on him, and I like the senior Bush, by the way. Doesn't look too steady on his feet, but I mean, given his age and everything, that's not much of a stretch for anybody. Of course, I also went on to talk here about the resurrection of the dead. The whole basis of Christianity, of course, is resurrection. That does not end with the grave. And I have one here, which I've written about many times and talked about. So, is there hope for the dead? Never mind born again Christians. How about cloned again Christians? All the peoples of the world, with their many silly religions, will look on in wonder when the star travelers return, the true gods who will stop the carnage and kill the populations to winnow the herds. And they shall raise the dead like the phoenix rising from its ashes, by cloning the bones of the dead. And then shall you know your mother, father, brother, and sister as you knew them in life. So if you think about the episode of Sodom and Gomorrah and Lot returning, leaving Sodom and Gomorrah with his wife and daughters, and the two tremendous explosions, and now they've done testing of that area, and the crystal glazed sand around that area where they surmised Sodom and Gomorrah actually existed is exactly the same as the ground around the bomb sites of Nagasaki and Hiroshima when they dropped the bomb there. There's no doubt in my mind that they were destroyed by a pair of nuclear weapons or bombs of some kind. And then you talk about raising the dead. You remember that song, that old hymn, the hip bones connected to the leg bones connected to the hip bone, and hear the word of the Lord. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Right? Well, so in the book of Enoch, it says, the hand of the Lord, in parenthetical star traveler that is, was upon me, and he brought me out by the Spirit of the Lord, and set me down in the midst of the valley. It was full of human bones. He led me around among them, and behold, there were very many upon the valley, and lo, they were very dry. And he said to me, Son of man, can these bones live? And I answered, O Lord God, thou knowest. Of course, I guess that's what gave rise to the only God knows. Again, he said to me, prophesy to these bones and say to them, O dried bones, hear the word of the Lord, star traveler. Thus says the Lord God to these bones, behold, I will cause breath to enter you, and you shall live, and I will lay sinews upon you, and will cause flesh to come upon you, and cover you with skin, and put breath in you, and you shall live, and you shall know that I am the Lord. So I prophesied as I was commanded, and as I prophesied, there was a noise, and behold, a rattling, and the bones came together, bone to its bone. And as I looked, there were sinews on them, and flesh had come upon them, and skin had covered them, but there was no breath in them. Then he said to me, prophesy to the breath, prophesy, Son of man, and say to the breath, thus says the Lord God, come from the four wings, O breath, and breathe upon these slain, that they may live. And so I prophesied as he commanded me, and the breath came into them, and they stood upon their feet, an exceedingly great host. Then he said to me, Son of man, prophesy, and say to them, thus says the Lord God, behold, I will open your graves and raise you from your graves. This is from the book of Ezekiel, chapter 37, verse 1 to 12. Now, it may be true that this is an allegory for the eventual coming together of the Jews into their own homeland, Israel. But as far as I am concerned, it's deeper meaning, and that is what allegory means, a deeper meaning beneath the prima facie one, that is the surface one, is that this quote-unquote Lord or star traveler possesses the power to raise the dead through some heretofore unknown knowledge of cloning, hence the origin of the song. Oh, the leg bones connected to the hip bones connected to the backbone, now hear the word of the Lord, etc., etc. And so you shall live again, born again, cloned, your very DNA, right down to the very subatomic cellular structure of your very being. Not a replicate, not a duplicate, but actually you. And look what we're doing now with cloning, sheep and organs. And there's a fellow in Montreal who was waiting for a heart transplant, and they took his stem cells and injected it right into the heart, and the heart is healing itself, repairing itself even as we speak, or in this case, even as I speak and you listen, Rex.
Nice.
Now, if the next pope's name is Peter, then we had all better duck, because then Armageddon is just around the corner. Hillary Clinton is not yet through, as I mentioned. She'll conquer greater political pinnacles even than the office of the U.S. presidency, which, by the way, won't be worth much after Trump anyway. Tremendous explosion around the Union Station in Toronto. That's here where I live. Many killed. We have so many people from India living here. I guess you do too, where you live, right?
Yeah.
Right? So my prediction, as I mentioned to a few of my friends I work out with, Christopher Columbus actually did discover India when he first set sail and accidentally discovered America. If you don't believe me, take a good look around you. Lo, these many 400 years later. Who knew he was so psychic? And then, of course, I've got here conscription in Canada and the U.S. will return. In May, then October and November, this world shall tremble in fear. Now, this was first prophesied in Stargazer Predictions and Prophecies for 2015. Then, to wit, Donald Trump is elected president November the 4th, 2016, New York Times. And if that doesn't make you tremble in fear, nothing will. Yes, death of George H.W. Bush Sr., I'm afraid. In 2004, no, I'm sorry, my mistake. In 2104, that's 2104, Mother Church shall be no more. Rome's home, this Pope to flee. All that's left shall be the sea, brackets, but not the sea. That is the Holy See. When there's these new attacks on American citizens, by the way, when I wrote this a couple of years ago, citizens flocking to Canada, its properties priceless. I didn't realize why in my mind's eye I kept seeing millions and millions, hundreds of thousands of Americans moving northward into Canada. And when Trump was elected, do you know the switchboards of the immigration offices up here from coast to coast lit up and actually were blown out from people making inquiries about immigrating to Canada. Did you know that?
I did hear about that. It's funny because it seems like every time there's a new president, the opposite side of the person that they want to win, it says that exact same thing. I'm moving to Canada, or I'm moving to Mexico. It was like that 8 years ago when Bush got in office, and a lot of the entertainers were saying, no, we want Gore to win. So yeah, I do remember that.
Well, that never struck me ever. It's only when I picked up that vision, as it were, recently, the last couple of years. I had never known that, as you said, the losers wanted to move up here.
Well, that was on American media. I mean, you're in Canada, so I've also noticed here, like I've traveled the country extensively, and depending on what state you're in is going to have a big impact on the kind of commercials you see. When I was in Maryland, out there by D.C. for a month, the majority of the commercials were of sports cars and high-end vodka. Out here in San Antonio, the majority of the commercials are fast food restaurants and beer.
Right.
And trucks.
You said that depending on what state you're in, and 50% of Americans are in a state of depression.
Sad and true, unfortunately. I would like to see things turn around, but there's so many people that are seeing otherwise.
You mentioned Maryland. Did I not mention something to you about a private plane crash in a bush area near a bridge or something?
That was on the West Coast, the Northwest. You saw something happen towards, I think it was the Puget Sound area, or at least I know it's the Northwest.
Didn't you say you knew of that place, or you had friends that were a plane?
I had a friend that actually was in a plane accident and died in the Northwest. It was towards Cannon Beach, which is kind of the area that you had that vision. Yes.
Well, I don't know why, but when you mentioned Maryland, that whole thing just flashed back in my mind's eye. Some words will trigger certain images and visions, and again, I have to remind you and remind myself, because I didn't write it down here this year, of that same incident, which must still be ahead of us, because if it had already come to pass, I would not be seeing it. So,
well, let me jump in real quick, Anthony. Didn't you say before you saw like a bridge and water, correct?
Yeah, it was like bush, like trees, like kind of foresty, with a bridge and like a small Cessna or a white plane or something crashing down around the bridge, and something like that. And I still see that.
Because there's a really big bridge out there by Chesapeake Bay in Maryland, so maybe that might have
Yeah.
been something that you were seeing. I don't know, but it's just on the other side of the country.
Well, keep a mark of that. Let's remind ourselves of that every so often.
Sure, absolutely.
These things, can happen overnight, and I've had things like that happen. Did I tell you? Well, it's on my website, but did I tell you that incident about? I refer to it as the blonde wig incident at Variety Village, the children's charity, where I work out and work with them.
No, I don't think I've heard about that.
Well, one of the few times that I've been a witness to my own prediction. um, it's kind of a humorous anecdote, but I'll relate it quickly. Anyway, in fact, it just came from there. It's what they refer to as a tent. Well, tent, it's a building, but because it had a circus theme originally, the Circus Barker was the emblem before it became a heart. That was the emblem, have a heart. But here in Toronto, Variety Village, there's a young lady who is in charge of the programs of exercise for handicapped children and senior citizens in the field house where the track is, and the basketball court in the middle of the track. You know how those things are set up, some of these big gyms. And anyway, she's quite an attractive lady, about 20, 26 or 27, long blonde hair. And somebody had told her who I was and what I do. And she asked me, as usual, as young women do, and men, about her love life. Or in her case, she said, my loveless life. And I said, there's a fellow around here, meaning there at the gym, who secretly is in love with you. I said, he has white, snow white hair. And when you see him, you'll know that. And then at that moment, there's a young fellow who works there also, about her age, and he come walking by or jogging along the track, and I turned and I said to her, I said, you know what? I said, it looks just like this young fellow here, exactly in the face. Now this young fellow has chestnut brown hair, and it's thick and curly. I've always envied him. Anyway, I said, he looks in the face just like this fellow here. And she says, oh, well, he works for me here, and, blah, blah, blah. She says, I wouldn't, now this fellow knows nothing about it at all. And she said, I wouldn't be interested in that kind of a relationship. I said, all right. I says, and as I was leaving, I said, if tomorrow he suddenly dyes his hair white, I said, you will know that at least he's secretly in love with you. A big laugh, and nobody thought anything of it. And so I left. 2 days later, or 3 days later, I came back, and you have to picture this. The exercise area, as I say, it contains a 6-lane track, and inside the track is the basketball courts. And to get out into the field house, you have several different gateways. It's just like you would go to a baseball game where you have to go in between these open sections to get up to your seats. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Hello? Okay, I'm trying to set the scene for you. So the next day, I went in, I changed into my duds to go and exercise. I walked through one of these gates. As I'm walking through, this fellow comes walking in front of me, snow white hair. As he walks in front of me, I look to my right, and this girl comes out of another gate exactly. She was on her way to work, coming in, and we both spotted him exactly at the same moment, simultaneously. We looked at him. She looked at me. We looked at each other, like our mouths agape. And I pointed with his finger, and I said, what the heck? Anyway, I went up. I called him over. His name's Jackson. I said, Jackson, come here. I said, what'd you do to your hair? He said, oh, I dyed it snow white. Now, let me reiterate. He knows nothing about what I told her. That's very important. I said, what'd you do to your hair? Oh, he said, well, I dyed it snow white, Then, well, I reached up and I touched it, and it was a wig. A wig that fit perfectly over his hair and looked exactly like his hair, thick, bushy, and curly. And, he said, well, it's a wig, But I said, what, how, what, So I turn around and there's a big box full of wigs, all different colors, a huge box, must have been 200 or 300 in there. Someone had donated this box of wigs for people there who are undergoing, especially women, undergoing chemotherapy. He just walked by, he just casually picked up this snow white blonde wig and put it on his head. Exactly at the moment we came in and saw him together. And she came over and, and she explained to him what happened and all that, Now the point I was trying to make here, and I said to her, and I says, well, you know what this means? And she says, well, yes. She says, but I hope it's not the love affair you were talking about. I said, no. I says, but this prediction, the vision I had 2 or 3 days ago that I described to you, had to come to pass exactly as I described it to you, which proves, and I've proven this many, many times, and I believe in it 100%, our future and our destiny is set in stone, or in this case, in the planets and the cosmos, and we just wait until the cogs of the wheels fall together and we fall into our destiny. And that's a very, very good example of whether we have free will or whether our destiny is actually set in stone for us. And I believe we have no say in the music we play. Rex?
I've heard both theories about that. I've heard that people feel that they have precognition, they're seeing the future that can't be changed, and that is kind of a scary thing to think about. And then when you get into what time actually is, I mean, that's all relative to the person's thought process. You can be doing something extremely boring for an hour, and it can feel like all day. You can do something exciting all day, and it can feel like an hour. So that's very interesting to bring that up.
Well, don't forget, there is no such thing as time at all. It's only something we created so we don't bump into each other.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's our perception to grasp different things on a line of visuals, essentially, because if it all happened at once, we'd have a tough time conceptualizing that, and I can certainly see that. So it's fascinating indeed, and I like the way you bring up some of the possibilities with the star traveler, the God of the Old Testament actually being like an ancient astronaut. And with the time that we have left, Anthony, I was hoping maybe we could get into one or two more predictions for what you see here in 2017.
All right. Just to finish off with that, it's same thing as I said about Trump, what I said about Hillary. These were images. Sometimes the human part of us, basically, I'm just a simple guy, not much formal education, street guy, a lot of people call me. Con artist, a lot of people have called me. But these images, and I said to George Norrie, I said, some of the things I predict, I said, I don't even believe, which he took aback. He said, what? What do you mean? You have to realize that I'm only a conduit, the same as we all are. This electrical force, for want of a better word, electrical with a capital E, suffuses through us, leaves us, and leaves a residue of everything we ever do, say, hear, whatever, or what's coming. What you just mentioned about all times are encapsulated into one single little point. It's easy to understand the concept of a past event being out there electrically in the universe. People talk about time travel. I don't believe you could physically time travel back to the time of Caesar or Hitler, but I believe the electrical residue is left behind because the universe is electrical and takes pictures of everything and records sounds and so on. If you had a camera or your psyche is tuned to that frequency, you could quite easily travel back and pick up those things. And it must work the same as so-called future events, which is a little more difficult to explain, but it's the same as the past and the future. Then you got the tachyon theory, things, particles that go so fast that they go backwards. In a sense, there's really no backwards or frontwards or anything or any time. It's all there. If you think of things come into existence, they wear out, and then they disappear and become other forms of energy. So I guess the point I was trying to make is even that girl that I said, well, this fellow, she was talking about a love affair. I said, I don't know but this is the picture I see. And whether I misinterpret it as a love affair or this, and I know this fellow happens to like her now. I found that out after the fact. But I said, this picture, no matter what my interpretation of the picture that comes to me is not me. I'm just a vehicle. I'm a vacuum for these things that come to me. And all I can do is trying to interpret what I see. If you saw this picture, you would probably interpret it better than I, right? So basically, that's what I mean. That's why I allowed my personal feelings about Trump to interfere. What my really, truly gut instincts, my feelings were that he was probably going to win. And if you listen to a lot of these political pundits and some of the astrologers that were on Coast to Coast, for instance, Norrie's show, they all said exactly the same thing. And then they would hedge their bet by saying, but, you know, there's a chance he could, every single solitary one. And the fact is, never let your feelings, you should go with your first instincts, your first feelings. Like a guy goes to the track, and he looks at a horse at home. Oh, this looks like a good horse. I got a good fit. Then he gets to the track, he looks at the odds, coat board is, oh, well, no. And what happens to that horse that he should have run with, no pun intended, won by, 50 laps or something. And the horse he did bid on, right, came in so late that the horse had to tiptoe into the stables and take off his shoes so it wouldn't wake the other horses.
It's you bring up a good point, because a lot of times when I don't go with my gut instinct, even if I think it's the rational instinct, it doesn't seem to come out the right way. So if people learn how to listen to their gut, I think that they'll have a much better opportunity to come up with the right conclusion indeed.
It truly is the true brain. That's, and all the pundits, all the Eastern philosophies always talk about the real brain and secondary brain in your solar plexus. And I believe that. I guess the best way, people have asked me, how do you teach yourself to be psychic? The best way is, and we've all been through this when we were young, the most beautiful woman in the world that you're madly in love with says, we need to have a serious talk. Let's meet at our favorite pub. And you get that twisting knot in your stomach, and you know what's coming. I think we should see other people. Die, kill her. That's the best example of being psychic that I can actually teach people or tell them about, because we've all been through that. I'm sure even someone as magnificent as you, Rex, will probably experience that.
Oh, I know the feeling. Absolutely. You bring up a good point. I've had that before. Yes.
I can't even call it an analogy. It's, what would you call it? A simile, a reality.
I'd call it a shitty fact when you have that feeling. That's what I'd call it. It's a shitty fact. When you have that feeling you're with someone, they're cheating on you, and that's your gut instinct. And like you said, your gut instinct is pretty much always right. That's one of those uh-oh moments.
That's right. As opposed to the false brain, which is, oh, geez, I really want this. So I want that Rolls Royce, or I want that beautiful. Is that being psychic? No. That's just hopeless desire. That's the big difference from that gut feeling, let me tell you.
Right.
Anyway,
yeah, it is.
What else you wanted me to talk about? What else?
Yeah, I was hoping before we closed out tonight, with the time that we have left, you could give us maybe one or two more predictions that you see pertinent for this year.
Well, nearer and nearer comes the cashless society. Credit card numbers will be tattooed on the foreheads and hands of all earthlings. And again, I quote from Revelation, and he who has not the mark of the beast in his hand or head shall perish. I mean, we're at the point now where we don't even use money. Well, I do. I'm old school. But I've always believed the mark of the beast, aside from Gorbachev possessing the mark of the 8th head that talks about him. I saw a beast rising from the sea. It had 7 heads and 8, and it had 10 horns and 10 crowns or diadems on each crown. And of course, that became the common market of the euro dollar, and trying to financially keep the world together. I never invested in the euro. I knew it would never work. And of course, look what's happening now with it. If I had known I was going to live this long, I would have bought some gold, because currency as we know it now, it's just practically useless. I mean, if there's a depression like the dirty 30s, it would be even worse if that's possible, because in those days, anybody who had money, had real money, it was 100 pennies represented a whole dollar, or an ounce of gold for $1. Now, with Nixon getting rid of the gold standard, and then we followed a few years later, all we have is the printed paper, well, not printed plastic now, and anything happens to the government or loses faith or loses. So far, and hopefully it will maintain. The United States still has the most powerful currency in the world, because whoever has the biggest stick has the most powerful currency. So as far as I'm concerned, it's always been and always will be the United States. And I predict it will be thus for quite a while yet in the future, because you can take, even though the French franc is worth more, Dutch guilders are worth more, you have to go to money changers or lenders to get it changed at airports or whatever the currency of the country is. The American dollar, you could march into the wilds of Borneo, to the wild men of Borneo, hold up an American dollar, and oh great, we'll take that. You can take a dollar, you take American dollar anywhere. So you guys don't have to worry too much about your currency. But I'll tell you, we're getting a lot closer to really a cashless society. And I'm sure the mark of the beast was not only just Gorbachev, whom I walked up to personally and told him, you do possess that mark of the beast mentioned in Revelation. Because it says in Revelation that one of the heads of the beast appears, that's the key words, he appears to have received a mortal wound, but its mortal wound was healed. Now, the biblical pundits, going back eons, have always suggested that we will know the Antichrist when he comes up in the world. He's attacked, wounded, or shot in the head, and dies and comes back to life. Well, it doesn't say that. What it says is a wound that appears to be a mortal wound. Appears, looks like, but it isn't. And then all the world shall go after the beast and wondering who is like to be. Well, Gorbachev traveled the world. He's a nice guy. He came here. He did charity work. The McDonald's people. He came here to open up a bunch at Variety Village to sanction all these PlayStations that McDonald's uses for the kids when they go in and play and do the merry-go-rounds and all that stuff, which is how I got to, shall we say, meet him. Anyway, but that's it. He was, with his appearance, and then it says the first beast shall hand his power to the second beast. Well, then at the same time that Gorbachev was here at Variety Village, oh goodness, what's his name? One was the prime minister, and the other one was the president of Russia at the time. Gorbachev and goodness, what was his name? Anyway, he was here in Canada on the same day, but was at the other end of the country in the British Columbia, Vancouver. And my old granny, who missed the Titanic by 4 hours, used to always quote the Bible and say, "Beware the man with the withered arm." What was his name? Gordon, not Gordon.
You're talking Putin, are you?
No, this is going back when I went up to Gorbachev here and told him he possessed the mark of the beast mentioned in Revelation. At the other end of the country was the current prime minister of Yeltsin. That was it, Boris Yeltsin, and he was in British Columbia the same time that I was confronting Gorbachev here, and as I say, my old granny who missed the Titanic by 4 hours, and she said, "Beware the man with the withered arm," and nobody seemed to realize that Yeltsin had a withered left arm, which he kept in his pocket or whatever, and you never got to see it, and I noticed it, and Gorbachev was there, the biblical beast, or the head of the beast, here at the same time. So what that meant was that was the beginning of the countdown to Armageddon. Well, shortly after, of course, the Gulf War broke out, and what's his name, set fire to all those oil rigs. What was his name?
Saddam Hussein?
Saddam Hussein. And from there, it's just escalating, as I say, a pebble thrown into the sea of humanity, widening and widening and widening, ever widening, until it's going to engulf all of the world. And then at some point, someone's going to go nuts and try and start a controlled nuclear war or something. And then that's when we're all going to be in trouble. Because it's just a matter of time. And no matter what happens, if they don't come back to save us, the star travelers, the entire human race would perish, which I'm sure it won't. But that's what I think. That's what I think is going to happen. And on that cheery note, I think I'll leave it.
Yeah. And on that note of world destruction, unless we get saved by aliens, have a wonderful night, folks. Yeah.
Hey, listen,
I tell you, Anthony, it's always nice to speak with you. And I appreciate your, you coming on the show with us and giving us your predictions. I've been following you for some time. I would recommend our audience, if you'd like to know more about Anthony and his predictions, go to anthonycarrpsychic.com. And also, if you're into some really good R&B, check out the new Boyd Gang Band that Anthony's a part of. And also get your edition of Stargazer Predictions and Prophecies for 2017 and beyond. It's been awesome, Anthony. Thank you so much for coming on the show with us here at the Leak Project.
And the book, as always, is entitled The World's Most Documented Psychic. I should add now, after Trump, the Trump prediction, not necessarily the most accurate psychic, but
You crack me up, Anthony. I do enjoy your humor, man. It's nice to hear you talk like that, because I think sometimes people take things way too serious, especially when it comes to politics, and sometimes you just got to lighten up, I think. So I like that.
Even some of the other shows I've done, as I mentioned to you, first thing I said, well, let's get rid of the elephant in the room, which was the Trump prediction, So with a track record of thousands and thousands of very accurate world predictions, going back to the Titanic being found and discovered and raised, parts of it, and murder of Pope John Paul I, and the attack on 9/11. I mean, so many. But you say you're only, just like an actor, you're only as good as your last performance. Well, my last performance was, I should have gone with my gut feeling, but I didn't, because I couldn't betray my original feeling, because it was in print all over the world, so I couldn't back out.
Right. It was like one of those things where you felt like you were dug in too deep already. I totally understand. And another thing, too, that I want to let our audience know before we close out tonight is we're going to have a show tomorrow with somebody that's very good at Vedic astrology and Western astrology. So make sure to tune in tomorrow at 9 p.m. We might actually be doing a live show. And if you're interested in having your chart done, send in your date of birth, the time, as well as the location. And one of these days, maybe I'll get you, Anthony, to read my hand and tell me what my future will look like.
Man, why don't you guys jump a plane and come up here for a weekend? Justin will be happy to put you up.
That sounds like a plan. I might take you up on that. That'd be great.
He's got the room here. He won't charge you much.
Perfect. That sounds awesome. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Anthony. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
See you later, Anthony. You take care. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us this edition of Leak Project. I'm your host, Rex Bear, and we have famous psychic, stargazer, Anthony Carr from anthonycarrpsychic.com. Now, Anthony is also a part of the Boyd Gang Band, some incredible rhythm and blues. I'd strongly recommend checking it out. He has a magazine and publishing article called The Stargazer Predictions and Prophecies, and we're going to get into the year 2017. So, Anthony, it's great to have you on the show here with us, The Leak Project. I always enjoy speaking with you. How the heck are you?
Well, I'm, as I already mentioned, I'm another year older and deeper in debt. But what was the question? Oh, how am I doing?
Nice.
I'm having a senior moment, as they say. But how's everything with you, Mr. Rex Bear?
It's great, and it's nice to finally get a chance to talk again. It's been several months. And I had a chance to actually go through your Stargazer Predictions and Prophecies. And I noticed one of the things that you put in there, one of the first things you put, was you see the new president-elect, Donald Trump, as somebody that's going to march America down the path of hell straight into World War III.
Well, first of all, we all thought that Hillary Clinton was going to be the first female president. And I couldn't back out of that prediction because I had put that in my book 10 years ago. So 10 years ago, and I have an email media list of 7,000 worldwide. So there's no way I could retract that. And I had to stand by it anyway, because as I say, 10 years ago, I mean, who knew about Donald Trump at the time? And I always said, although I did say right after that prediction, I had said a dark horse will suddenly appear out of the clear blue and take a run at the presidency and could win and would make Iron Lady Margaret Thatcher, the Prime Minister of England, formerly the late, look like a panty waist. But I had no idea until Trump mentioned that he was going to take a run at the presidency, who that was. And I got to tell you, as many times as I've been asked who was going to win, I always had this nagging doubt in the pit of my stomach, the solar plexus, your gut feeling, your instincts, that no matter what I was saying with my false brain, that's our so-called intellect, the real brain is that nagging feeling we all get in solar plexus that's going to always tell you the truth. And I, I really ignored that. And I always tell my students, and I always say, never, never let your personal biases get in the way of the universal truth. And I was just as guilty of that as anyone else. And now here's something from Nostradamus that some of the experts who were supposed to be experts in Nostradamus, Nostradamus lore, what's that one fellow's name? Hogue, I think it is, John Hogue. Anyway, and they missed this one, and it says, quote, you may have a copy of it there, Rex. One day the great powers will become friends, and their power will increase. America will be at the height of its power. To the man of blood, the opportunity will be given, the man with the orange helmet. I mean, how close can you come? This is 400 years ago, the man with the orange helmet. Then it continues, but the two will not remain united for long, and in 13 years they will surrender to the Middle East. There will be much loss on both sides, and Pope Peter will be needed. Now, this is from a book written by Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre sounds like the macabre actor back in the 30s and 40s. Anyway, that's Nostradamus 2003 to 2025 by Peter Lorre. I predict President-elect Donald Trump is going to march us down the path to hell and straight into World War III. Now, you know, Mother Russia's mandate has always been and always will be, quote, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. Trump and Putin may be buddy-buddy today, but tomorrow, Putin is playing Trump like a violin, just stringing him along. Or should that be like a trumpet? According to the Toronto Star, who said on September 22, 2001, which was just after they printed my prediction about 9/11, September 22, 2001, quote, we were still embarrassed that we bought an earlier phony prophecy attributed to the 16th century soothsayer Nostradamus about the U.S. electing a village idiot as president, unquote. Now that's from the Toronto Star, that's not from me. Oh yes, and many a truth is being spoken in jest. I mean, who knew as president? Oh yes, and many a truth has been spoken in jest. I mean, for God's sakes, America will never be the same after his reign, though it be brief. Within 2 years, he'll leave office, either vertically or horizontally, or be impeached, and the presidency will never be the same again, having left it in shambles. I believe Trump will spark race riots, another civil war, as in the civil war between the states when Abraham Lincoln was elected president, reverse women's rights and destroy America. In short, he will unwittingly spark the apocalypse. Anyway, ye gads, what changes shall be wrought in the coming years? So prepare ye then for the new world order. Again, flee to the mountaintops. Eventually, the darkest caves, the bowels of the earth. World War III is upon us, or shortly will be. The Mideast will ignite like a Roman candle. This current quote-unquote skirmish is aught but a prelude to global conflagration. And never-ending chain reaction, this oscillating conflict between Muslim and Jew will draw in every nation on earth, increasing exponentially. It is as a pebble tossed onto the mill pond of humanity, its stillness forever shattered, its ever-widening circle engulfing all. Nor shall the West escape. Quote, be not smug, O ye on foreign shores, for I shall rain down fire and brimstone upon thy heads. And that's from the Old Testament of the Christian Bible, of course.
Well, and I wonder sometimes too, because like you said earlier, when you had that vision of Hillary, but there was that inside of your gut was telling you that that might not take place. Sometimes, do you think that maybe this prediction that you're making might be based upon the fact that you don't